بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Finally, we get to Al-Balagha. What are we talking about? We're doing a Tahleel al-Lughawi al-Kamil for this segment of a larger verse. Lillahi ala nasi hijjul bayt. We did all the sarf, we did all the nahu, and now it's finally time to enjoy the sweet fruit, al-balagha, eloquence, right? And that's what this course is all about. So there's two things that we need to understand. First is that this is jumla khabariya. It's jumla ismiya and it's jumla khabariya, meaning that this is an informative sentence. And we learned, if you recall, we learned the different meanings of Jumla Khabariya. Let's go back to Al Jumla Al Khabariya, something we learned earlier in this course, and refresh our memories about Al Ma'ani, Al Majaziya, metaphorical meanings, or Al Balaghiya, rhetorical semantics of Al Jumla Al Khabariya. Now, be careful as a reminder, the term khabariya is not to be confused with the term khabar of a mubtada. Okay, we're not talking about khabar of a mubtada. Khabariya can be thought of as al-ikhbariya, an informative, a sentence that is informing you, giving you information. And you can do that with jumla ismiya and jumla khabariya. You can do that with jumla ismiya and jumla fi'liya. So the default meaning of jumla khabariya is to notify the mukhatab. This is just a quick review. Is to notify the mukhatab about something. You're notifying them. You're giving them information. That's the default meaning. The second default meaning is that you're notifying the mukhatab that you know something that the mukhatab may already know. These are the two default reasons why we use jumla khabariya. That's the asl. But sometimes the norm is departed. قد تخرج الجملة الخبرية. Sometimes it leaves, it departs the norm of these two meanings into معان بلاغية أو مجازي, metaphorical or rhetorical meanings. كثيرة, and what are those many different meanings? First one is al-amr. Second one is ad-du'a. Sometimes, so al-khabariya can mean al-amr. It's not about notification or communication of information. It's actually telling you to do something, but it looks like khabariya. So this is when khabariya is not khabariya. Khabariya is amr sometimes, okay? Khabariya is a dua. Sometimes it looks like khabar, but it's actually a dua. And sometimes it's a nahi, it's prohibiting you from doing something. And sometimes it's al-wa'd, a promise. And sometimes al-wa'id, threat from Allah. These are the five rhetorical semantics or metaphorical meanings of jumla khabariya. Okay, so which meaning is applicable here? When we look at lillahi ala nasi hijjul bayt, we see that this is jumla khabariya. What is the rhetorical semantic of this jumla khabariya? Well, what's the fa'idah, right? What is it really doing? What it's really doing is that it's telling us that this is al-amr. This is a command from Allah. So when Allah says, Lillahi ala nasi hijjul bayt, for Allah alone, required on the people is hijjul bayt. What is He really doing? He's really telling us to do it, go do it. He's giving us a command. He's saying, in other words, hujju, do the hajj, al-bayta. Hujju al-bayta lillahi ya nasu. So Allah is really giving us a command, even though it doesn't look like an amr command. So this is the first fa'idah balaghiya. from this jumla khabariya. So what this is teaching, what this linguistic analysis is teaching us is that don't interpret the Quran unless you've spent a lot of time studying a lot of Arabic disciplines as well as Aqidah and Usul al-Fiqh. Those are the minimum requirements for us to interpret the Quran. The vast majority of humanity is not capable of interpreting the Quran, but we can benefit from the verses of the Quran. And even the simpler verses like Lillahi ala nasi hijjul bayt. A child may hear this verse who doesn't know anything. They say, okay, they get the idea that you have to do Hajj for Allah. But a scholar will look at this verse, right, and look at all these linguistics, and there's fiqhi meanings involved here as well. So always consult the scholars, always consult the tafasir. The second amazing fa'idatun balaghiya is that taqdeemul khabar, when the khabar is brought forward, when the khabar is muqaddam, right? قدم الخبر فالخبر مقدم. So taqdeemul khabar, bringing forward the khabar, yufid al-hasr. It notifies us of al-hasr. To bring home the point, let's look at this simple Zayd example, and then we'll go back to Lillahi ala nas hijr. But if I say Zaydun fil bayt, right, um, then what I do is I invert it. I do inversion. I play with the syntax. I do taqdeem. I make the khabar muqaddam. So I say fil bayti Zaydun. What's the difference between these two sentences? If you ask a grammarian, in many ways, grammarian is like a faqih, a fiqh specialist. He will tell you halal or haram, right? If you go to a faqih, hey, is this halal? He says, no, it's haram. You go to faqih, he says, is this haram? He says, no, it's halal. His job is done. A faqih will tell you halal and haram. A grammarian will tell you jaiz or la yajuz. He will say yajuz or la yajuz. So if you go to a grammarian with these two sentences and you ask about these two sentences, he says, Zaydun fil bayt, jaiz. Zaydun fil bayti Zaydun jaiz. His job is done. His job is done. But if you go to a balagha expert in Quranic eloquence, they will say this is not the same as this. There's a subtle difference. Yes, the basic idea is that Zayd is in the house, but there's a subtle difference between the two. And not only that, the balagha expert, the rhetorician, the rhetoric Arabic expert in rhetoric, will say, in your particular situation, I recommend you say this. Or he might say, in your particular situation, I recommend you say this. So sometimes you say this, and sometimes you say this. Sometimes, in other words, it's not appropriate for you to say this when it's more appropriate for you to say fil bayti Zaydun. That's the job of the balagha expert. He or she will tell you how to say the right thing at the right time for the right audience in the right way. Whereas the grammarian will say, Khalas, both of them are halal, both of them are okay, leave me alone. I have nothing else to say. Whereas the balagha expert will go further deeper into the wisdoms of when it's better to say this, when it's better to say that. So my question is, what's the difference? What do you think is the difference between these two sentences? So the answer is that Zaydun fil bayt is normal speech. Zayd is in the house. We have mubtada in its normal place, and we have the khabar fil bayt is in the normal place. Of course, when I say khabar is fil bayt, I'm looking at a simpler understanding. If you want a deep, detailed understanding, you would say mawjoodun, right? Mawjood is the khabar. Regardless, the point is that Zaydun fil bayt is normal speech. Zayd is in the house. But let's say there is some discussion, some debate. Hey, is Zayd in the school? Is he in the madrasa? Is he in the masjid? Is he in the souk? Where is he? If there's a debate or discussion going on and people are wondering where is Zayd, then it's more appropriate for you to say fil bayti Zaydun. أي ليس في مكان آخر. He's not in any other place, because there was some doubt, there was some debate, there was some context that got you to invert the subject predicate order. You're saying he's nowhere else illa fil bayt. This is called taqdeemul khabar yufidul hasr. This is hasr. Hasr means that this and only this, nowhere else or no one else. There are many different ways to do hasr. In Balagha, in QL2, Introductory Arabic Grammar, we looked at the grammatical mechanical stuff of how to do a hasr. However, in Balagha, in this course, we'll look at hasr again from rhetorical perspective. We'll look at various asalib, styles of doing hasr. The first style of hasr is with illa. Like when I say, or when Allah says, La ilaha illa anta, ma Muhammadun illa rasulun. This is the default style, al-uslubus asli, which is what we studied in QL2. But in Balagha, we'll look at more ways to do al-hasr. تقديم المعمول حتى إنما تعريف and so on and so forth. There's like 5 different ways to do al-hasr in Balagha. Okay. So the 2 Balagha perspectives for this expression lillahi ala nasi hijjul bayt is that from the perspective of Jumla Khabariya, it's an Amr. And from the perspective of Taqdeem, bringing forward the Khabar, there is Hasr going on here. Meaning that we do Hajj only for Allah, not for any other gods or purposes or ulterior motives. So this is normal speech and this is Hasr. And we'll look at, as I said, 5 beautiful ways to do hasr. In QL2, Introductory Arabic Grammar, we only looked at one basic default way of doing hasr, which is hasr with illa and lamma. So that's all for Balagha, and inshallah in the next lesson we'll try to cover al-qira'at and al-lugha, the dictionary and the various Quranic recitations. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.